When speaking our native language, we all use idioms much more often than we even realize. So in this video, I am excited to share with you 47 super common German idioms that you will hear, read, ultimately want to use yourself, right? They are so fun. They're kind of hilarious sometimes with their literal translations, and we're going to look at them and how they relate to English or don't. So we have 4 categories. We're going to check out some idioms that are literally exactly the same. That's our first category. Then we'll look at some idioms where it's very close, just slightly different. Then in the third category, we'll have German idioms where, yes, we have an English idiom for it, but they're super different. And then in the final category are some German idioms for which we don't have an English idiomatic equivalent whatsoever. We are going to start by looking at 3 exact matches where the German idiom translates exactly to how we say the same idiom in English. So for example, idiom number 1 is das Rad neu erfinden, which literally translates to reinvent the wheel, which is exactly how we say this in English, right? So to not start from scratch with something, but to use existing ideas or products, systems, whatever, right? For example, wir müssen das Rad nicht neu erfinden. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Idiom number 2 is den Nagel auf den Kopf treffen, which literally translates to hit the nail on the head, right? Meaning that you got something exactly, right? Your perception of something or how you worded something, etc. And again, this is precisely how we communicate the same idea in English, to hit the nail on the head. For example, du hast den Nagel auf den Kopf getroffen. You hit the nail on the head. You got it exactly right. Idiom number 3 is den Wald vor lauter Bäumen nicht sehen. Literally, to not see the forest for the trees, right? So you're getting distracted by the details, right? You're losing sight of the big picture. And again, in English, we say this exactly the same way as that literal translation, to not see the forest for the trees. For example, du siehst den Wald vor lauter Bäumen nicht. Konzentriere dich auf das Wesentliche. You're not seeing the forest for the trees. Focus on what's essential. Now, this next section, we're going to be looking at the almost one-to-one German to English idiom equivalents, right? There will be sometimes very minor differences, maybe even just one word that's slightly different between the two, but otherwise they're strikingly similar. So the first idiom in this section, but the 4th idiom overall, is sich in die Höhle des Löwen wagen, which translates literally to dare oneself into the lion's den, as opposed to how we say to walk into the lion's den, right? To do something super risky. So for example, mit dieser Meinung wagst du dich in die Höhle des Löwen. With that opinion, you're walking into the lion's den, right? Risky territory. Idiom number 5 is den Kopf in den Sand stecken, to stick the head in the sand, right? So stick, and then we're also saying the head, as opposed to bury one's head in the sand, right? So 2 words that are a bit different. For example, man kann nicht immer den Kopf in den Sand stecken. One can't always hide his head in the sand, right? Meaning you can't run away from reality. You have to acknowledge what's actually happening here, okay? Then idiom number 6 is auf den Punkt kommen, to come to the point, or as we say, at least in American English, to get to the point, right? So to use another idiom coming up later, to stop beating around the bush, right? But to talk about the important stuff right away, right? To stop being distracted, or to another, so idiomatic, to stop pussyfooting around something, but just go straight for it, to be direct and forthright, right? To get to the point. Bitte komm endlich auf den Punkt. Please get to the point already. Idiom number 7 is Himmel und Hölle in Bewegung setzen. I like this. So it's to set heaven and hell in motion, whereas in English we say to move heaven and earth, right? So multiple differences here. I personally like the German version better. It sounds somehow a little, I don't know, I guess the word picture to me is a little more exciting, yeah? Himmel und Hölle in Bewegung setzen. So, for example, ich werde Himmel und Hölle in Bewegung setzen, das zu erreichen. I will move heaven and earth in order to achieve that. Then, idiom number 8, das fünfte Rad am Wagen, the fifth wheel on the wagon. And we talk about the third wheel. We don't talk about the wagon at all, right? So again, you can see the similarities. And again, important in this is that the meaning of the idiom is the same, right? To feel out of place, to feel maybe superfluous, unnecessary. Why am I even here right now? I don't belong. I don't have anything to contribute. So for example, bei dem Treffen fühlte ich mich wie das fünfte Rad am Wagen. At the meeting, I felt like the third wheel, right? I didn't belong at this meeting. Why was I even there? Idiom number 9 is den Faden verlieren, right? So to lose the thread. We talk about to lose one's train of thought. This might be a place where arguably the English idiom is a little more colorful than the German one, to lose one's train of thought. For example, Entschuldigung, ich habe gerade den Faden verloren, right? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought, right? So we got distracted by something and we don't know how to continue with what we were just saying. Idiom number 10 is ein Ohr abkauen, to chew someone's ear off. Ouch. Okay, so we talk someone's ear off. Either way, the ear's falling off, so that's not too fun. But of course, the German version is a little more graphic with the chewing. I think it's kind of funny. For example, sie hat mir wieder ein Ohr abgekaut über ihre Probleme. She talked my ear off again about her problems. Idiom number 11 is sich zum Affen machen, to make a monkey out of oneself, or as we say in English, to make a fool of oneself. For example, bei der Party hat sich zum Affen gemacht mit seinem Tanz. At the party, he made a fool of himself with his dance, right? Or with his dance scene, we could also say. Idiom number 12 is in den sauren Apfel beißen, to bite into the sour apple. And in English, of course, we communicate the same idea of needing to do something very unpleasant, right? But gritting our teeth, right? To use another idiomatic expression, gritting our teeth and just doing it anyway, right? So we're biting down on that bullet. I assume this is coming from kind of the old Wild West, and you imagine someone just got bit by a snake and they have to, like take the venom out, or it's like, it's some like primitive surgery and they don't have any pain meds or anesthetics or whatsoever, anesthesia whatsoever. And so instead, they'd bite down on a stick or a bullet, while they're going, ah, and just getting through it anyway, right? That necessary life-saving surgery. And then in German, right, it's not the bullet, it's the sour apple, and definitely not related to the old Wild West. I like both of these, actually. I think they're both rather fun. Idioms are just funny. For example, ich mag es nicht, aber ich muss in den sauren Apfel beißen und es tun. I don't like it, but I have to bite the bullet and do it. Idiom number 13 is etwas an den Nagel hängen, to hang something such as a job on the nail, where we would say to hang up one's boots, right? To retire or to otherwise quit or discontinue some particular activity, a job or maybe a sport that you usually play, etc. So for example, hat seinen Job an den Nagel gehängt und ist die Welt gereist. He hung up his boots and traveled around the world. Idiom number 14. Now, this one is a little bit more of a stretch, perhaps. You can tell me in the comments below if you think it belongs in this category or in the next category. But die Flinte ins Korn werfen means to throw the shotgun in the cornfield, right? Into the cornfield. So it's like a deserting peasant, from one of the many land wars fought on the European continent, right? So he's like, that's it, I give up. And he throws his shotgun into the cornfield, right? And we say, still with throw, right? To throw in the towel, this now coming, I believe, from boxing, to give up on the match, to forfeit the match was to throw in the towel. So for example, we have, das Projekt ist schwierig, aber wir dürfen nicht die Flinte ins Korn werfen. The project is difficult, but we mustn't throw in the towel, right? We have to see this through, not give up. Idiom 15 is also arguably a little bit more of a stretch, but wherever we can make a connection, we should, because it helps us remember the German idiom. So in German, you say in den Wind schreiben, which means to write into the wind. And this relates to our English idiom to kiss something goodbye. So if you imagine, like you're writing words, but not on paper, it's just into the wind, right? Of course, that's going to blow away. And to kiss something goodbye, you're also blowing something away. So in my brain, these two can connect, and it helps me remember in den Wind schreiben. Hopefully, it will help you too. So for example, deine Beschwerde kannst du in den Wind schreiben. Es wird nix ändern, right? You might as well kiss your lodged complaint goodbye. It won't change anything. Now for number 16, we're dealing with what is technically termed a simile because we're using the word like or as. So wie ein Fisch auf dem Trockenen, like a fish on dry land. And we say like a fish out of water. So again, it's communicating the same thing, right? Like someone is completely out of place, not where they belong, feeling very uncomfortable. And I just think it's funny how German and English, it's so close, but communicating it essentially from a different perspective, right? The fish is on dry land, or else we're talking about the out of water in English. I love it. Okay, so for example, in der neuen Stadt fühlt sich wie ein Fisch auf dem Trockenen. In the new city, he feels like a fish out of water. Another very similar simile is idiom number 17, wie ein Elefant im Porzellanladen, right? So like an elephant in a china shop, as opposed to like a bull in a china shop, either one of them being very bad news in a china shop, right? So for example, benimmt sich wie ein Elefant im Porzellanladen, wenn es Gefühle geht. He behaves like a bull in a china shop when it comes to feelings, right? So this idiom in either language means that the person is very clumsy, right? Very clumsy with feelings, as in this example. Idiom number 18 is ein heißes Eisen sein, which means to be a hot iron. We can also say to touch a hot iron, which instead of the sein would be anfassen. Yeah, so either way it works. To be a hot iron, to touch a hot iron. And in English, we say to be a hot potato. For example, dieses politische Thema ist ein heißes Eisen. This political topic is a hot potato, right? So whether it's a hot iron or a hot potato, the point of the idiom is to say this is a topic that makes people feel uncomfortable. It's challenging, it's complicated, it's rife with strong emotions, right? Let's stay far away from this hot potato or this hot iron, right? Let's not touch it with a 10-foot pole, to use another idiomatic expression. Number 19 is das ist ein Katzensprung, which means that's a cat's jump, and it relates to the English idiom that's a stone's throw away, meaning that something is very close, yeah? Du brauchst kein Taxi, es ist ein Katzensprung von hier. You don't need a taxi, it's just a stone's throw away from here. Now that second category was big, and this third category is as well. Now we're going to be looking at the idioms that have other equivalents, right? Where we have an idiom in German and an idiom in English that both mean the same thing, but the colorful idiomatic expression itself is very, very different, right? Not just, oh, we're tweaking a word here or there, just, completely unrelated. So, for example, idiom number 20 is unter den Tisch fallen lassen, to let fall under the table, which relates to the English idiom to sweep under the rug. I love both of these idioms. I just think they're great and just awesome mental images, right? Which is what you want an idiom to be. That's what idioms are, right? They're very colorful images in our minds. So we have, wir können diesen Fehler nicht einfach unter den Tisch fallen lassen, wir müssen ihn beheben. We can't just sweep this mistake under the rug, we must fix it, right? So these idioms mean to not ignore something, to not just, let someone get away with something or, gloss, skim over, pass over something, right? You have to look something right in the face, right? You can't just let it fall under the table where no one can see it, or sweep it under the rug where no one can see it. Idiom 21 is den heißen Brei herumreden, which means to talk around the hot porridge. And in English, this relates to the idiom to beat around the bush. So for either one of these, having a little background understanding might be helpful. So den heißen Brei herumreden, to talk around the hot porridge. Original version of this was more about like a cat just like going around a hot bowl of porridge, looking for the coolest part where she could start eating the porridge. And so it's morphed a little bit over time. But of course, the meaning of this, just like we have with to beat around the bush, means to not be direct about something, to not get to the point, right? But to talk about other things that are unimportant and not the reason why we're having whatever given conversation right now, right? You're avoiding a topic that is a hot potato, right? Or ein heißes Eisen, right? By talking around it or beating around the bush. So, for example, rede nicht den heißen Brei herum und sag mir, was los ist. Don't beat around the bush. Tell me what's going on. Idiom number 22 is fix und fertig sein, to be fixed and finished, which in English we would communicate by saying to be running on fumes, right? So this means that you are just so beyond exhausted that you're fixed, as in like fixed on the spot, like just kind of stuck, frozen, like in an emotional stupor, right? Because you're so toast, and again finished in an emotional sort of sense, right? So you're fixed and finished, which I kind of like that in English, right? I might have to start saying that in English and then explaining it to people. It'll become a new idiom in 20 years. I love it. To be fixed and finished, to be running on fumes. Nach einem langen Arbeitstag bin ich fix und fertig. After a long workday, I'm running on fumes. Idiom number 23 is one of my favorites. Die Suppe auslöffeln müssen. To have to spoon out the soup, right? Which then equates our English idiom to have to face the music, right? So there is some negative consequence to some decision that you have made or to some behavior that you have exhibited, etc. And now you have, another idiom, you made your bed and now you have to lie in it, right? You have to suffer through those negative consequences that are a result of something you did, right? So die Suppe auslöffeln müssen. Du hast das Chaos verursacht, jetzt musst du die Suppe auslöffeln. You caused this mess, right? This chaos. Now you have to face the music. Idiom number 24 is einen Zahn zulegen, to add a tooth, right? We really don't know what that means when we just look at the literal translation. The idiomatic equivalent is to put the pedal to the metal, right? We have to hurry up. We have to go as fast as we can, speed things along. Wir müssen einen Zahn zulegen, sonst kommen wir zu spät. We have to put the pedal to the metal or we'll be late. Fun background on this one. So in the Middle Ages, there were special hooks that would hang the pots above the open fires for cooking, and the pots, it was actually a mechanical apparatus where they would have teeth on them so that you could raise or lower the pot, like closer or further away from the fire. And so that's where this phrase is coming from. To add a tooth means to go down a notch, to go closer to the fire so that the food cooks faster. That's where that's coming from. Now, idiom 25 is auf dem Schlauch stehen. I probably use this one myself as one of the more common idioms, to stand on the hose, right? To not be able to make heads or tails out of something. So it's not about being dumb in any way, but it's that you're trying so hard to wrap your mind around something and you still just can't quite figure it out and you can't move forward because of the lacking understanding. Sorry for the formatting here with the something. For example, ich verstehe das Rätsel nicht. Ich stehe total auf dem Schlauch. I don't understand the riddle. I can't make heads or tails out of it, right? I don't know how to even take the next step in trying to understand this, right? Someone's going to have to step in and get us off from standing on the hose so that we can move forward. Idiom 26, we are now more than halfway through. We have das Blaue vom Himmel versprechen, to promise the blue from the sky, right? Which equates the English to promise the moon, right? So both things that you can't possibly deliver on. You can't give someone the blue from the sky. You can't give someone the moon, right? So you're making some sort of promise that is much more grandiose than anything you will actually be able to follow through on. Verspricht immer das Blaue vom Himmel, aber hält es nie. He always promises the moon, but never delivers. Idiom 27 is einen Bären aufbinden. So this means to tie a bear, right? And you have to do it to someone. So it equates to pull someone's leg. So in the examples, willst du mir einen Bären aufbinden? Are you trying to pull my leg? Right? It's a humorous exaggeration or even to the point of lying, I would say, but not with actual malicious intent. It's more humorous, okay? Number 28, I love this one too. Über den Tellerrand schauen, to look over the edge of the plate, which equates to think outside the box, right? So it's to be creative, not to be stuck in the same old rut, to consider new ideas, new possibilities, etc. Du solltest öfter mal über den Tellerrand schauen und neue Dinge ausprobieren. You should think outside the box more often and try new things. Idiom 29 is das ist Schnee von gestern. That's snow from yesterday, which then lines up with the English that is water under the bridge, right? So meaning that this topic, whatever it is no longer relevant, right? We don't need to talk about this anymore. It has no application anymore. It's done. It's in the past, okay? So, for example, warum sprichst du immer noch darüber? Das ist Schnee von gestern. Why are you still talking about that? It's water under the bridge. Idiom number 30 is nicht dein Bier. Not your beer, which lines up to the English, not your beeswax, right? So it means that something is not someone else's affair, right? It's none of their business. Nicht dein Bier, not your beeswax. Was sie in ihrer Freizeit macht, ist nicht mein Bier. What she does in her free time is none of my beeswax. Idiom 31 is ich verstehe nur Bahnhof, which means I understand only train station. And that relates to the English, it's all Greek to me, right? I've always assumed that this German is coming maybe from tourists, who are like asking for directions to the train station. But that's the only word they can say. And then in the response back, with all of these complicated directions or something, the only word that they actually understood was Bahnhof, and that was it, which isn't going to help. But anyway, I could be wrong about that, but that's how I've always thought of it in my own head. So for example, erklärt das so kompliziert, ich verstehe nur Bahnhof. Yeah, he explains it in such a complicated way, it's all Greek to me. Idiom 32 is etwas aus dem Ärmel schütteln, to shake something out of the sleeve, right? I believe this is coming from magicians, probably also from the Middle Ages. There are lots of idioms that come from the Middle Ages in German. And this one, kind of a warning, because I think that this one is easily confused. I think that many times English speakers think that etwas aus dem Ärmel schütteln means to pull something out of thin air, right? Which that means to produce something haphazardly or random, maybe even something that's like intentionally fictitious. But etwas aus dem Ärmel schütteln means to be a piece of cake, right? It just means that it's super easy for that person. So for example, kann solche Gedichte einfach aus dem Ärmel schütteln. Yeah, so he can write poems like it's a piece of cake, right? Like it's nothing. It's so easy for him, and he has this beautiful poem, right? Just like a magician who's doing tricks, and it's so easy, right? He's just pulling it out of his sleeve or shaking it out of his sleeve. Idiom 33 translates to do the devil, right? So den Teufel tun. And when we say the same concept in English, we say when pigs fly. So this means absolutely never ever, right? Because pigs are never going to fly. And in German, the idea would be, I'm not going to do this thing, even if the devil were to try to make me do it. So, ich werde ihm das Geld nicht leihen, den Teufel werde ich tun. I won't lend him the money when pigs fly. Idiom number 34 is Tomaten auf den Augen haben, literally to have tomatoes on the eyes, which sounds like maybe it's some sort of relaxing spa treatment, but it's not. What it means is to be as blind as a bat, right? So, hast du Tomaten auf den Augen? Das steht doch da. Are you as blind as a bat? It's right there, right? So it means you can't see. Can't or won't, yeah? Idiom 35 is das ist Jacke wie Hose. That's jacket like trousers. And it means, right, that it's the same, that there's no difference. Just like our idiom, that's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, right? It's just a different way of saying the same thing. I used to find this German idiom confusing, right? Because I'm like, Jacke and Hose, I mean like jackets and trousers, they are distinctly different. Like if you tried to wear your trousers like a jacket, like that's not going to work very well. So this idiom confused me. Then I looked into it and I discovered that the origins of this idiom go back to the 1600s when for the first time it became fashionable to make pants and jackets out of the same material. And so then the tailors at that time advertised it that way in German. They would say Jacke wie Hose, right? To mean that the material that was used for the jacket and the material that was used for the trousers or the pants was the same, Jacke wie Hose. And that's where we get this idiom from that we still use today to mean it makes no difference, right? It's the same. Ob ich heute oder morgen gehe, das ist Jacke wie Hose. Whether I go today or tomorrow is 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Idiom 36 is das ist nicht gerade das Gelbe vom Ei. That is not quite the yellow of the egg, right? The egg yolk. And it means that's not quite up to snuff, right? It's not quite good enough. It's not meeting our expectations or reaching the standard that we have set. So, sein neues Auto ist nicht gerade das Gelbe vom Ei, aber aber es fährt. His new car isn't quite up to snuff, but it works. Yeah, or it drives. It goes. Idiom number 37 is about the Teufel again, right? About the devil. Den Teufel an die Wand malen. To paint the devil on the wall is to meet trouble halfway. So this relates to the belief that to even just draw a picture of the devil is to essentially invite him and his evil, right? Just like this concept of to meet trouble halfway is to like go looking for trouble, right? Like you want the trouble to happen, and instead of taking that pessimistic view of, trouble's going to come, well, you kind of see that in the example. Mal nicht den Teufel an die Wand, es wird schon, yeah? Don't meet trouble halfway, it'll work out, right? So this is about not having a pessimistic attitude and inviting troubles upon yourself. Idiom number 38 is another simile, wie ein Schluck Wasser in der Kurve, like a gulp of water in a curve, okay? So you need to envision a pipe, right? And pipes that curve any which way, and water, which is so flexible, right? Or so thin, it follows the slightest little curve in the pipe, okay? And this lines up with the English idiom, thin as a rail, right? So this just means very, very, very thin, right? Arguably too thin. So for example, nach der Diät sieht sie aus wie ein Schluck Wasser in der Kurve. After the diet, she looks thin as a rail. And now we have come to our fourth and final section of idioms for which we do not have an idiomatic expression in English that communicates the same thing. Maybe a fixed expression or semi-fixed expression at best. Sometimes even just single verbs, right? Single verbs that we would use in English, where in German we have this option of a fabulous idiom. So idiom number 39, again, this is so common, they all are, die Nase voll von etwas haben. To have the nose full of something is to be sick and tired of something, right? You are completely fed up. Ich habe die Nase voll von diesem Lärm. I am sick and tired of this noise, said every parent of young children the world over. Idiom number 40, etwas hinter die Ohren schreiben, is to write something behind the ears, or in English, like I guess the concept of to make a mental note of something. I mean, it's just a way of saying remember something, but with some extra force, some extra oomph behind it in German, right? To say, das solltest du dir hinter die Ohren schreiben, right? That's like, mark that, remember that, you should make a mental note of that. Idiom 41 was a new one for me when I was putting together this video, but I like it. It is die Kirche im Dorf lassen. Okay, so it means to leave the church in the village, and the concept of it is to keep things in perspective, to not exaggerate, not go overboard, right? So again, this harkens back to the Middle Ages, where the design of a town, would have the church in the center. And so if you're leaving the church in the village, like where it belongs, or like keeping things in perspective and not, moving it to somewhere else and getting the picture skewed in some way. Yeah? So du solltest wirklich die Kirche im Dorf lassen und nicht so übertreiben. You should really keep things in perspective and not exaggerate so much. Number 42, I used this just the other day, alles in Butter, right? Everything in butter, which we could relate to the concept of everything's hunky-dory, or everything's super duper, everything's peachy, right? We have several options, but alles in Butter, right? Something you could use in talking with friends, keine Sorge, alles in Butter. Don't worry, everything's just fine, hunky-dory. Idiom number 43, again, I rather like the German way better than English. Well, I suppose in this category that makes sense. German actually has an idiom and we don't at all. So, aus allen Wolken fallen, to fall from all clouds, right, is to be completely taken aback, right? I guess I kind of envision, it's like you're up on cloud 9, just living in the sky, everything's wonderful, and then you fall from the clouds, right, when you're smacked in the face by reality, whatever that reality may be, right? So like in the example, als die Nachricht hörte, fiel aus allen Wolken. Yeah, so like as he heard the news, he was completely taken aback, right? Couldn't be more surprised. Idiom number 44 is sich aus dem Staub machen, to make oneself out of the dust. So where this is coming from is with deserting soldiers, like when the dust would be kicked up, from like foot soldiers. The dust is really thick. That would be the chance then for deserters to sneak away, right? Quickly and secretively, right? And that's exactly what this beautiful English verb means, right? To abscond is to leave hurriedly and secretively. So, als die Polizei kam, haben sich alle aus dem Staub gemacht. When the police came, everyone absconded, right? Everyone ran away quickly but sneakily at the same time. Idiom number 45 is ein Haar in der Suppe finden, to find a hair in the soup. I think just like we saw with an earlier idiom, this one can get confusing because sometimes people think that this means the English idiom, the fly in the ointment, but it isn't, because the fly in the ointment is some sort of drawback from something, like an event was just fabulous, perfect in every way except this one detail, which was the fly in the ointment, right? But ein Haar in der Suppe finden means to nitpick something, right? So you're looking for flaws, right? Even to the point of essentially creating a flaw in your own mind, in your own perception that doesn't per se exist, right? Others might not agree with you. So findet immer ein Haar in der Suppe, egal wie gut alles ist. So he's always nitpicking something, no matter how good it actually is, right? He finds something to complain about, something to criticize. Ein Haar in der Suppe finden. I feel like this is a good example of a literal translation that we could just start using in English. Make this an idiom, right? Again, I'm given it 20 years to find a hair in the soup or to go looking for a hair in the soup, which you can also say in German. You can say suchen, to search for a hair in the soup, as well as to find a hair in the soup. All right, second to last idiom, idiom number 46, auf dem Holzweg sein, is to be on the wooden path, meaning to be off the mark, right? You're missing something here. The Holzweg in a German forest is a path that's used by the lumberjacks, like for felling trees, transporting them, etc., not to be confused with the walking trails through the forest that, the rest of us go on in order to enjoy the forest. So auf dem Holzweg sein, right, means to be off the mark. You're on the wrong trail, right? We can use that idiomatic phrase as well. Mit dieser Idee bist du auf dem Holzweg, right? You're off the mark with that idea. You're headed in the wrong direction. That's going to end in a dead end, yeah? And then finally, idiom number 47, einen Korb bekommen, to get a basket, right? Which means to be spurned. So this idiom, from what I understand, also harkens back to the Middle Ages, in the times of knights in shining armor and all of that, where women, kind of Rapunzel-like style, would be up in their towers and they would lower a basket for their lover and pull them up in the basket. But then if they sent down a basket that was maybe broken or it was too small so that the lover couldn't actually ride up in it, it was communicating like, this is over, this isn't going anywhere. And so then that translated into the idiom that we still have today of just getting a basket, right? We're not saying specifically that it's a small basket or a broken basket, but that's where it's coming from. So to spurn someone, to reject someone's advances of some kind, as in, hat ihr seine Liebe gestanden, aber einen Korb bekommen, right? He confessed his love to her, but was spurned, right? We can also talk about giving a basket instead of receiving it. We could say like she gave him a basket. Ja, sie hat ihm einen Korb gegeben. And it's the same concept, just obviously from that other angle. I'm so glad that you joined me here to learn about these 47 super common and very fun idioms. Leave a comment down below to share which one is your favorite. And of course, I hope you continue learning with me here on YouTube. See you in my next video.